So welcome back to Wandering into Wellness.
Hey folks.
Hello. We are here today with my lovely friend Kevin Callan, who is an acupuncturist. I used to work with him in the Alba Room in clinic there, and very excited to have him finally joining us. It took a little bit of needling.
Yes, just needling.
Oh,
there we
nice.
go.
Well done.
Yeah,
You're off the mark.
And funny.
Fun number one.
It took a little bit of gentle coercion.
Yes, it
to
did.
get you to join.
Well, I think when you started talking to me about this topic in particular, I felt like I had loads of opinions. So I was a little bit more confident about coming and talking to you.
Yeah, and I just basically went, okay, no, you have to come. That's it. I've decided you're coming. Have I nailed you down?
Yeah.
Yeah, I beat you into it.
But we had like a plan to do, originally what we'd said was like one podcast with a bunch of men from different strata and spheres of society to talk about the role of men and patriarchy and all these sorts of masculinity, modern masculinity, and then we planned to do one with women, but we realised after doing the first men's one quite quickly, well, Lydia certainly did very quickly, she was like, shit, failure, I'm sorry. It's like, as in like we kind of, we almost realised, I think, on the day of doing it, that we got a very weak cross-section of society. And then immediately after doing it, we sort of realised there was a bunch of missed opportunities where we looked for maybe more kind of like toolkit approaches for men to kind of like manage their, you know, their self-worth around this topic, and all those other things we sort of just didn't quite get to tease them out. It's just a huge topic, I think, and there's
Massive.
too much in 1 hour.
I think what we did was a really good groundwork in it. I think we did an interesting start of a conversation, that this is a topic that is about continually asking those questions and delving deeper and self-reflecting, and naturally that space and time between the first podcast and this one has brought up a load of more stuff, certainly for me to think about. And when I was listening back to it, I realised, oh, hang on, we haven't touched on this, and we haven't touched on this, and we haven't touched on this, and these are really important things. And something that was definitely interesting that we had talked about during the week, me and Kevin, was that I was looking for this one to have Kevin along, and then also try and find an expert on patriarchy and the effects of patriarchy on men specifically, or on raising boy children specifically. And it's surprisingly hard to find experts who have any kind of speciality and the effects of patriarchy on men. There's plenty on the effects of patriarchy on women, and very, very few on men, which seems kind of to get to the heart of the topic, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about a very important group when you're talking about patriarchy. You're not talking about how it affects men, you're not talking about patriarchy. Because, somehow the inference is, when it's not talked about, is that men, and certainly I'm sure men who don't necessarily think about this too deeply, might feel slightly attacked by this Me Too movement, or what's being called a new wave of feminism, or because they feel that they're being told that they are responsible for patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
That they're doing patriarchy.
Yeah.
Because men murder women and men rape women and all of that. So all of that is true. But when you're not talking about the effects of patriarchy on men, you're not actually talking about it. You're just talking about women's experience of patriarchy, I think.
Absolutely.
Because most of the raising in my house was done by a woman, and I think that's true of most houses. So if men are being taught patriarchal values, they are being taught them by women as much as they are by men.
Which is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not women's job to point out to men what patriarchy does to them.
Yes, yeah.
It's not women's job, but men are not incentivized to examine how patriarchy affects them, because most men gain a lot of privilege from patriarchy. They get a lot of power from it. And
you're talking about, like, even now, if we were to take somebody who's, say, a 10-year-old now, do you think he's going to gain that privilege from patriarchy now, or is he gaining that? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely still. I mean, as came up in your last podcast, girls and boys are still gendered heavily about what's valuable about them, and what's valuable about little girls is them to be a princess, and what's valuable about men is that oh, isn't he boisterous? You know, or oh, isn't he, you know, little ructions, or boys will be boys, or, you know, all that stuff. So you get a message straight away, and as a queer little kid, you notice, like, well, I'm neither pretty nor ructions.
So pretty and ructions.
so what am I? You know what I mean? I know, like, I'm not allowed to be, you know. I have a very vivid memory. So this is how early it was with me that I was aware of the effects of the values. I was young enough to be, like, not in school yet, so I was probably in play school. And I used to, my mom's not a very femme woman, she doesn't have a lot of heels, but I managed to find a pair of heels of hers, and I loved clipping around her heels, and I would have a tea towel on my head. And my mom, who is very sound.
We're talking like Erica Badu, like...
Oh no, tucked so that you can flip.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Obviously.
I wasn't sure what you were supposed to.
Yeah, differences are being revealed here. But yeah, and so she cornered me. You know, she's very, very sound, my mom, you know, very right on, ahead of her time, and kind of, you know, said, not in an accusing way at all, very gently asked me, would I prefer to be a girl? And I knew immediately to say absolutely not, even though I was like, hell yeah, I want long hair, I want to be able to have my shoes make noise when I walk, you know, I want a bit of swish.
Yeah.
But I knew, before I had been out in the world, so not to get too airy-fairy about it, there's something in the ether there, there's something handed down there. Where you know that it's not that it's unnatural, you know that it's not allowed. Yeah. Because it is natural, because I'm being perfectly natural as a 4-year-old doing that sort of stuff, but I still know that little boys aren't allowed to do that, and that I'm invalidated if I do that. You know what I mean? And I think kids are still wholesale getting that message. Absolutely. They're wholesale getting that message. I think this current conversation that's happening now en masse is and the gorgeous anger of, you know, women's marches and the this is not consent marches, and starts to pierce holes in that. Yeah. But
in terms of maybe you're saying that that is still not the conversation that's reflecting on how those ideals are being handed down. That's about the anger back at the patriarchy
and the here and now.
Yeah.
Because it's women's job to make sure that they're not murdered, that they get equal pay. That it's not women's job to sort it all out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
that's why we need to be in it together a bit more.
Yes, exactly. They have to demand it. But like you can't. But there is, I feel, a gap between that and then expecting men to fix something that's not broke for them. Like, why would a straight, white, middle-class male with economic opportunity have any reason to question how his gender was policed when he was little if he felt it reasonably comfortable to step into that? Yeah. And it gained him all of this connection with his cohort. Yeah. And what's unique about being gay is you get the adjacent privilege of being white and male, and that my sexuality isn't announced in every situation. When I apply for a job before people know me, when I go to the bank, when I get a loan, you know, nobody knows. They just see me.
You don't look like I'm looking for a loan.
Yeah, you know, exactly. Although I regularly do for loans to queer things. But you know what I mean? Like, they're not, you know. So I get all of this privilege. Yeah. But I have been hugely affected by patriarchy, negatively, and it is something that I've had to survive. And you get a unique insight into how performed masculinity is. Yeah. Because I've had to learn, first of all, in your teens, the situations where you had to perform in a more masculine manner, deepen the voice, not pronounce your INGs, not sound too well spoken, not, you know, because I come from a working class area, you know, so working class rural place. Yeah. So you know, you notice the work that all of that is, and then you eventually, when you move to a city and escape the rules, you then can be yourself.
Must take a lot of layers of onion peeling to get to
Yeah,
where you are
that's
now.
part of the coming to terms with being gay thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of it is to get to see how the patriarchy was rammed down your throat, how you were invalidated from before you ever really were gay, from when you were very little.
Yeah.
If you identified outside those very strict rules of what's allowed for men that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You are, first of all, similar to women, not exactly the same, but similar to women. You're at physical risk. You can be attacked, and I regularly was physically attacked. But you also know, like, you just are invalidated by both men and women, because there's nothing more dangerous than challenging gender norms.
Yeah.
Because you're upending the whole system.
Absolutely. Where did you first start to pick up your new self-worth, or where did you first look for sources of that, or what was your...
In my teens, I met a lot of other freaky little queers that were interested in music and art and drinking lots and taking lots of drugs.
Okay.
And so we had that pain in common and those interests in common.
Yeah.
And we delighted in our difference, you know, and everyone else was dreadfully pedestrian and ignorant. And
yeah.
I would wager a lot of them still are.
That little rage hasn't gone away.
Be cool, Kev, be cool. And so that was the first time that I knew that there was a power. There was a delicious freedom in being forced to step outside what was allowed for straight men and straight women, and that it wasn't a consolation prize. It was amazing.
Right. Yeah.
To be outside all of that, because God help them, they don't know how grey their life is.
Yeah, but you feel you have to suffer for your art.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do, and it gets the better of some people, and you know that is the reason why gay kids and adults are more likely to be addicts, are more likely to commit suicide, you know, or die younger, all of that stuff. And depending on the acceptability of your queerness, right up to, you know, trans issues and all of that, you know, it's more and more difficult.
Yeah.
And the outcomes and survival rates and, you know, all of that stuff are more and more difficult for the more queer you are.
Yeah,
right? And queer being not fitting into these very narrow
heteronormative things.
Yeah. And so it's been interesting because I've moved home to where I escaped from at 17, never ever wanting to go back.
Wow.
Ever after having been traumatized, really. And so after doing a lot of growing and a lot of coming to terms with myself and becoming very happy and secure, I find myself living back at home and being in the company of people who have never had to leave, never had to question the values of sending their kids for First Communion even though they don't go to Mass, or the fact that there is no shame in them saying that they're afraid if they're a man, or that there's no shame in saying that they're wrong if they're a man, or, you know, or not being able if they're a man, and all of that stuff, and all of the performed sighing in a certain way when you sit down, holding your shoulders in a certain way, like I see it in the gym, you know, grunting when you drop things, not answering you if you say, are you done with those weights, and they, you know, for fear that they may, I want to ask them, what do you think I'm going to think of you? Yeah. If you say, yes, thank you, I'm done with that.
Isn't it weird?
Do you think I'm
politeness is a sign of non-masculinity.
Exactly. And I would say, you know, different classes for the want of a better description.
Sure.
You know, I'm certainly from the background that I come from. That's what the message I got.
It's kind of funny. So it's almost we're saying as the perception is that as you move from a blue collar environment and move towards a more genteel class structure in society, that maybe there's a sense looking at that from the blue collar society that there's masculinity has gone from that level of society as well. Is that
they've a broader set of rules.
Yeah.
If you're, let's say, middle class, you're allowed. So, for example, the unconscious messages that I would have been given, not by my parents by any stretch of the imagination, bless them, they were very permissive of me being me,
Cool.
right, and loving and nurturing, and are the reason why I'm still around, you know.
Right.
But growing up, you know, if you weren't into GAA, and if you weren't into being boisterous and domineering and overpowering and competitive and violent, you and didn't behave in the way that carries those values, so that you weren't, you know, demonstrative in your physicality, and you weren't, you know, or you were good in school, for example, because I would have been reasonably good at school, you know, and I would have went and tried to do my best and all of that. That was not allowed.
You're doing a few things wrong there.
Yeah, I was doing quite a few things wrong, you know. Now, I was cute enough and supportive enough at home to know that this is my path out of here, you know, and I felt like an alien dropped into the middle of that. I was like, why aren't people admiring music and fashion, and why aren't people talking about anything that's interesting to me whatsoever, you know what I mean? And why am I being physically attacked? It wasn't even that I have a problem, or had as a little child, with what other people were interested in. It was like, I was like, you're grand over there, just leave me alone, you know.
Yeah.
Like, don't attack me for having dogs, like, I'm grand here, you know. So you were actively policed, I guess.
Out of the fear, because you're threatening the patriarchy thing in the first place, I suppose.
Yeah, but that's by other children that are being taught that it's dangerous, you know, it's dangerous, and...
That doll might burn you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I shouldn't be banging the table, but, like, the big thing is that, fundamentally, that anything that is deemed to be female is derisive. A man should be in no way female. So the big thing, slur that would have been hurled to me when I was very little, before secondary school. In secondary school it would have been, you know, faggot or freak, because I had style. Exactly. But primary school was that you were a woman. You know, that was it. That you were a woman, or you were a sissy, which was the inference that you were in some way a woman. And I remember going home, I actually can vividly remember, like, standing in the kitchen, what the kitchen was like and all that, and being really, like, frustrated to the point of tears, you know, about, I think, my foster brothers at the time and the neighbour boy kids rounding on me, as kids do. It wasn't necessary. I was the pick of the day that day.
Okay.
You know, this wrangling that happens at big groups of kids. Yeah, exactly. But they went to their usual one with me, which was that I was a woman, or sissy, and also that I was a squealer, that I would tell and I never told a tale in my life, but it was that that was their way of policing you, if you know what I mean, that you were weak-willed because you wouldn't participate in anything that was bold or bad, and that you were therefore going to be the one that was going to tell. Jesus. And so all of that was all wrapped up in that you're a woman.
How the mafia came about.
Yeah, exactly. So all of that was wrapped up in that you're a woman, and that women are all of those things, and that it is the worst thing in the world for you to be like that. But I went home anyway, and I said this to Mum, and I was absolutely fed up with it, and I was frustrated, and it hurt me, you know, was what I was getting at. And her answer to that was, because my mum's right on, she's like, well, where's the insult in being called a woman? I don't understand you.
Jeez, your mum's amazing. What?
She was like, well, part of it was I wanted her to be, I was frustrated, I want to actually kill her, and I probably went silent for the rest of the afternoon and huffed, if I remember my form rightly. But she was trying to get me to be responsible for not reacting to their values. And I wanted a little bit of sympathy because I was being, you know, picked on and devalued. I mean, I knew their values were wrong. I, you know, didn't believe that women were inferior. And in my house, my mum was the boss, so I actually had, you know, she was the main earner, she was the one that took responsibility, all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't that, it was more that I felt the injustice of being in some way invalidated for who I was. So that I wasn't a woman, but I was like me, and there was nothing to describe me.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and so, you know, you go through all of that, you hit drink hard at teens and go to loads of gigs and have loads of fun and meet other people like that, but you then are kind of carrying the wounds of that, for sure. And definitely the referendum was a huge healing time for all of that for me. Participating in sorting all that stuff out made you kind of get in touch with the reality of how it affected you. But you still see the effects of it now, where I am deeply uncomfortable around straight men when I'm one-on-one with them and I don't have something prescribed to talk about.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so if we were in a pub somewhere and I didn't know you,
for a second, just gonna get him to squirm. I don't know. Maybe I'll squirm as well. I'm not sure.
I would be now, like, I'm told by people I've confided this in that I don't show that, but I absolutely hate it. So all my lovely girlfriends' husbands, who are lovely men, must think I'm a weirdo.
Is it because you're picking up on what you expected from them when they were 7 years old?
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
And also they are like aliens to me. I walked away from their group.
Yeah.
I walked away from, because I didn't get it, and I had no currency in it, and on top of that, then I was attacked for not easily fitting in with it. And so I had to form my own thing. And so consequently, when I'm in their company, in work, professionally, I can totally be easy breezy, comfortable, and same with you, comfortable, no problem. But put me at a house party or a pub situation where I can't hear properly anyway, which makes it doubly difficult, and I just go into a blind panic going, what am I going to talk to this man about?
I don't even like his t-shirt.
I can't, and it's, it's not like we don't have things in common.
It's interesting, isn't it? You're just, your first thought is like, shite, we won't have anything in common, but actually you can't get past that to the obvious and easy ones, because there's loads of things I'm sure that you're going to share.
There's that, but the wound is that I don't feel good enough around them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, that's still there. That's such
that's the wound. Is
that you're going to be judged and found lacking.
Yeah, or that I am lacking. Not even that they're judging me, because I don't still fear homophobic judgment from anybody.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not that. It's that I am lacking.
Because that message was given to you from such an early age,
and
consistently.
Consistently.
You can still do courses in DIY, man.
And then
lots we can do.
I'll just talk about that. I mean, bless me, like in late teens, I flirted with the idea of making myself swat up in football. So
really, that's what I'm wondering.
A conversation with people. And, I remember when I first moved to Dublin in the early years being in taxis and actually indulging in football conversations with taxi drivers that I knew nothing about. And there's ways you can answer things to make it sound...
Oh, there absolutely are.
So,
I've had thousands of them. I also don't enjoy the football thing.
Yeah, or, the barbers either,
Yeah.
No,
that's painful. That's why I shake my head.
Yeah.
And get out of that's way too uncomfortable.
Yeah, and all through my 20s I cut my own hair.
Right there.
Yeah, because I just, not because I had a phobia, but because it's just, I did not connect with that.
Yeah.
That
the barbershop thing.
That male vibe, and so...
But so what can we do? So I have a son. What can we be doing in our raising of boys now that changes the narrative around this? What are the subtle differences that can be made?
Well, what I loved about your earlier podcast with the other guys, that manifesto that you mentioned, and about talking about teaching kids to be good people. And what's very exciting about the trans rights movement is that it's pushing the boundary of what actual gender means way out. Way beyond what I thought we'd get away with this early on in my lifetime.
Cool.
It's just all of a sudden leapt forward, so that you begin to, it gets diluted so much, which of course scares conservative people, but it gets diluted so much that what does it actually mean to be any gender? And I don't mean just looks wise, I mean values wise and how you carry yourself in the world and all that sort of stuff. So I think I personally, I don't have kids, but personally I would be constantly pointing out to them how skewy the value system is at the minute, and its purpose. That's what's interesting about it, is that I think really you need to see that the system of patriarchy has an actual purpose. It's not by accident. It's not because men are men and women are women and it just ended up being that way. It has a purpose for allowing people, for giving people a framework within which they can hide and deal with fear. In my opinion. And you can't, I think it's no good teaching a young person that everyone's different and no one's any particular gender and it's just important to be nice and kind and all that kind of stuff. Because you do have alpha male children that are very boisterous, and you do have very femme boys and very femme girls and all the in between, you know.
Yeah.
So there are, you know, extremes of the gender norms already in little kids. It's more about that one thing's right and one thing's wrong that I have a difficulty with. That, you know, one thing is the ideal and another thing isn't. And what is the purpose of that? The purpose of that is keeping people hemmed in.
Yeah.
It's weird how early it starts. Like, I keep hearing, as we started these conversations particularly, how early boys will recognise that they aren't allowed to cry. It's something like, it's like 3 years old or 2 years old. Is it 4? Was it? Okay. Yeah, by 4 years old, which is mad. And that they'll start to like reject the doll thing and embrace the football thing, like when they're 2. So like, it's so close to nature in terms of nurture. Like, it's from the absolute get-go. It almost seems to happen in the womb.
So they pick it up, I think, a lot of them, or it's very subtle. How it's disallowed ones that aren't necessarily going to be raging fashionistas or either or queer in some way either, but they have a natural interest in those sorts of things. They pick up on that it's not really what's done from other kids and you know, all that sort of stuff. What's interesting is I remember the times that I was policed as a little child. I wonder, do straight men remember when they went, oh, I better not show that. That's not allowed for me.
Well, like 2 instances that I can think of in my head is, for my son, there's a shoe shop that I go to sometimes in Greystones, and we went in there and I was just waiting for the lady to bring out a pair of shoes for me to try on, and he was like, I want to try on shoes. And he went straight over to a pair of kind of glittery, sparkly, high-heeled shoes while she was in the back, and he put them on. And he was kind of clopping up and down. Of course, he couldn't walk properly in them at all. And I was just thinking, oh my God, he's going to break them. I'm going to have to pay for them. It's going to be terrible. And she came out and she was like, oh, no. You wouldn't want to put those shoes on, son.
And it wasn't he was going to break them?
No. It was, the message was there. And I could see him kind of, he didn't know. Yeah. And he just kind of, there was a moment in him of...
That's happening all the time.
Yeah, and you know that. A little bit of him burned with shame about that he made a misstep, that he broke some rule or other.
That he didn't understand.
Yeah.
And yet he loves breaking the freaking rules.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. And my brother too, who obviously is an actor, he would have always tried to wear my mum's high heel shoes. I mean, he just would have worn them and clumped around, and he would have come down. We had these big sweeping staircase, and he would have come down the staircase and done this whole thing. And my stepbrother would have been like nearly physically vomiting at the vision of my brother clumping down the stairs and he just could not handle it, just like repulsed by the thing. And my brother, being my brother, of course, would just do it more,
twice as much,
but that's the same response that my son would do. It's not that he didn't care, it's that he cared so much that he didn't want to save face, he didn't want to lose face, so he's just like, I'm going to do it more and more and more, and see what happens. It's still the same effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, it's just really interesting to see, first of all, to get to grips with what is really disallowed for men, because I don't see it spoken about anywhere. You know, I don't see any male leaders on social media in response to everything kind of going, this is what's going on here, you know, we're not allowed to feel anything, we're not allowed to show vulnerability, we're not allowed to be afraid, so that we have to bully or alpha our way out of our fear. We have to hold ourselves in a certain way, we have to sit in a chair a certain way, we have to get up in a certain way, we have to be good at certain things, you know, we have to be able to dominate, and both women and men expect that because that's what everybody's taught. And so when it comes to actually experiencing their own humanity, they're absolutely ill-equipped, and they go around murdering and raping women, right? You know, they're like, that's the statistics, that's what happens. And they kill themselves more often. And we're like, oh, I wonder why men are so hard to get to the doctor. Like, because they're absolutely petrified, and nobody taught them how to be afraid or vulnerable. Women live in vulnerability. They live in vulnerability all the time. That's what they're busy telling everybody. We have to be afraid all of the time. And physiologically and economically, we're more likely to be poor, we're more likely to be attacked, we're responsible for other people's lives. We live in fear and uncertainty all the time, is what I hear women saying in one way or another. And men don't even know they are afraid. Right?
Yeah.
They don't even know. Like the patients that come in to me...
Was it so well layered over?
Yeah, they just they haven't realised, because certainly, because I would have suffered badly with mismanaged anxiety. And I recognise the signs from a mile off in patients, and to try and get a man to connect with the fact that they're actually afraid, and that's why they've got globus hystericus, or that's why they've got, you know, that's actually they're racked with anxiety. It's not even in their vocabulary, a lot of men, because it's disallowed. So life is scary, being a human and growing and living in uncertainty and showing up even though everything's guaranteed to go to shite in the end. Excuse my bad language. Is scary. And men are left with absolutely no tools with which to deal with that. So I just was really struck when I moved home to Dundalk, going to the gym, because I would have gone to city centre gyms, mostly gay people in them, you know, in Smithfield, certainly a broad mix. And you had alpha people in it, but they weren't the predominant. And so I go to this gym in Dundalk, a perfectly lovely gym, and there's loads of really nice men in it, obviously normal men, but they've never had to, a lot of them have never had to move away, they've lived there their whole lives, they've been involved and held and validated by small town values. So they've never had to question the system.
So Kevin's permeating into this thing.
Well, I'm silently watching them from behind, you know, judging them. God bless them. But you notice right down to how they put their gym bag down and what they talk about. I'm like, I just see tiny little toddlers, fragile little children, underneath this very thin crust of laughable masculinity and bravado.
So how do you go to try and permeate that thin crust in a way that's like, do you try? Do you kind of leave well enough alone? I mean, like, it sounds like you have an agenda to try. You feel like you're an agent in this thing a bit.
Well, I don't know. I think I don't because I have that wound around straight men that I'm kind of afraid of them. Not afraid of them. I feel not good enough around them. And
weird, even though you're seeing how weak they are as a result of not being able to show their vulnerability, that the strength and the courage is in the vulnerability that you show, and yet you feel like you're afraid of their lack of depth.
Well, I think it's because childhood wounds it's a different element of me, isn't it? It's that little child has never really, that part of you has never really gotten over that, and that is what's screaming to get away from them. You know, it's just like
tugging at your
it's just
I'm
like,
okay here.
Leave them to it.
This is not for you.
They make their own mischief. Leave them to it. But what's interesting though is nobody that I'm sure if I was better read, there are certainly people talking about, you know, theorists talking about it or whatever, but in popular culture, there's nobody really talking about, is it any wonder? Like, it seems the cart before the horse to ask men to stop raping and murdering women and not give them some tools to be able to deal with their own humanity. Or alert them to the fact that they're actually being policed within an inch of their own life, that they can't even answer somebody's questions about a dumbbell in a gym without questioning their own validity as a man. It's mind-blowing when you break it down, and that's in every little simple movement.
And in everything, even thinking of like, when in the last one we were talking about, do we need to redefine masculinity, and if we break down those old archetypes, is there a need to create a new archetype, or is it that there's just no archetypes? And then what are the definitions between, like, what is the thing that makes female versus what is the thing that makes male, compared to just what is what is really, what is it to be human. What I hear a lot coming up in situations is people analysing a situation and someone saying, you know, well, men tend to find that a harder thing, or a man saying, you know, like, men find that harder to deal with, so I'm going to deal with that harder, or I'm going to react in this kind of a way because that's us men just tend to do that.
Yeah, so
it's like
it's
identifying, and it's a given, and it's like a learned behavioural response of like it's a held belief. I will end up reacting this way because it's my belief that I will. Yeah. And is it about us needing to, or men in this specific instance, coming back to looking at when they're reacting to things, or looking at their behaviour in things and going like, what are my values around what makes me comfortable as me, rather than is this about a value that's being put on me that's prescribed to be masculine? Is this actually how I want to react, or am I just reacting this way because it's been taught to me?
Yeah, I mean, but you're not going to get men to do that of their own volition because of the privilege associated with being a man.
Right.
That's the thing. You know, most men, I mean, you know.
Could you hear me?
I was like, hang on a second. Most men, you know, obviously, you know, there are men that there are obviously lots of men want to do right, you know. But the difficulty is that, we said this the other week, didn't we? Like, on a personal level, those things that are destructive to me, I find difficult to let go of.
Yeah.
So I'll have a meditation regime and an eating regime and an exercise regime and a balance around work and all of that, and I'll feel connected and generous and quick to forgive, and you know, I'll be living a life where I'm having a nice time. Yeah, there will be small children singing all around me, and then, you know, I will get, you know, something will challenge me, and I'll feel uncomfortable in some way, and I'll revert to type of all the ways in which I numb out. And you know, I have been around this merry-go-round a fair few times, right? And you kind of sit there going, okay, so I'm toxic with sugar now, and I'm, you know, I haven't been to the gym in 2 weeks. You know, why is it I keep doing this? And there is an element of that which you might call ego, or that which you might call fear, or the devil in some traditions, you know, that has its own power and wants itself to be furthered, and has its ways of rearing itself up and charming you into saying, this time it'll be different, Kevin, it's going to be grand. Try this, try that. Sure, yeah. Just do it slightly different. You can handle it. And in fairness, people are awful, so you need to be known. You know. So that sort of stuff. And
there's the term we've come across a lot lately since I think we heard it first in one of our podcasts we did in Bulgaria, called honouring your shadow.
Yes.
Which I think is actually a beautiful way of talking about it. Maybe a very permissive way of talking about it, but I think if it's dealt with in a kind of an honest kind of light, that there's an aspect to people's darkness that is also, I don't know, maybe not to be embraced, but certainly not to be dismissed.
Oh yeah.
Like that it's okay to want to howl at the moon and rage a bit, and that has to come out in one way or another.
Yeah, and you have to be curious about it, and not run away from it and all that sort of stuff, and not try and fix it and accept it.
Yes.
But I guess why I'm talking about it is that patriarchy is a beast of the same kind. It is an answer to humanity's fear. Yeah. It is, if men are like this and women are like that, everything will be fine and you won't have to worry about uncertainty. That's really...
That's actually what it is, you're right, it's the default.
Yeah, that's what you're really taught, is that you will have connection with your core heart, you will have it with yours, everyone will know their place. Please God, don't let the gays mess it up on us.
Can't we just go back to it, Kevin? It sounds so nice, it sounds so easy.
It really does, except we're not crying.
You're kind of screwing this up.
You just be one of them.
I know, if you could just try harder. And, you know, like I've heard it said, and I don't know whether it's true, the most fertile parts of any ecology are at the fringes, right?
Interesting.
The most resilient plants, the most diverse,
it's very true.
Are at the fringes. And, you know, us humans are the same. It's always the freaks, the queers, the feminists, the lesbians that agitate
Yeah.
for more humanity.
More change, diversity. Like,
Yeah, and I guess, you know, what's interesting is when you talk about, because you're asking the questions, I know you're trying to lead me to answer a question, you know, about what do we do though, you know, what do we do?
Like for people listening,
yes,
who are going, oh, hang on, I haven't really thought about this, or these questions are coming up that actually I don't really know.
Yeah.
How do I make change? How do I start?
Well, look, you can hear that I'm passionate, first of all, to identify the problem. I haven't heard it identified. Just because I'm not very widely read, clearly. You know what I mean? I'm sure it's there as people are talking about it, but certainly not in pop culture, on social media. I don't hear people talking about, this is the effects of it on men, this is how policed they are within their life, this is why they behave in the way they do, and we need to identify that and call it out and discuss it. And there's that gorgeous term, toxic masculinity, right? And that encapsulates it all, right? That's what toxic masculinity describes. But nobody's really pulling that apart. I want to hear lots of straight men going, I remember when I was little, I realised I wasn't allowed to be like this.
Yeah.
And I just decided it was worth it. That price was worth it. But the other unspoken about costs are that you're not allowed to be sad, you're not allowed to be afraid, you're not allowed to be weak.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be soft, you're not allowed to underperform economically, you know.
Yeah.
All of those things are the price of being a member of that club. Whereas I'm allowed to do all of those things because nobody expects anything off me.
No wonder we're all jealous of you.
That's why we actually are having fabulous lives.
Yeah, genuinely.
Because that's the stuff that I'm really grateful about.
It's funny, in my family, so I remember dressing up in my mum's and my grand's dresses and hats and stuff. There's a photo of it, I remember, from my grand's house. And my sister and my cousin had dressed up in like a load of my mum's or my grand's stuff. And so it wasn't something that was frowned upon. It was a fairly conservative upbringing. Like I had like Presbyterian blah 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 thing, and that wasn't particularly frowned upon in itself at all. And I think my mum really wanted me to kind of move towards kind of the art thing. She thought that I had that in me, and then realised fairly quickly that I couldn't drop shit. I developed later, like, thank God. But then I still very much, like, whether it was knee-jerk reflex or whatever, but found myself in heteronormative lifestyle, and definitely with the anger issues and all those sorts of things that come with that, like 100%.
Yeah.
But it wasn't crushed out of me, that part of it, at all. But I still defaulted into that.
Yeah, but I would wager, and I might be wrong, that it was indirectly.
Yeah.
By society.
It's still around, yeah.
Because you're just not. You know that if you're in a group of lads, what the rules are.
Yeah, it's pretty scary if you're a media environment where you're being brought up. Can be great, can be open and permissive and whatever else, and broad and liberal. But then the outer world, which is, you know, I mean, your son's about to go into like big school or whatever. That's what unfortunately is going to shape the thing, isn't it? So it's really at a school level where we have to do so much more at that to try and tackle that masculinity thing. I mean,
because sure, I mean,
all his teachers are going to be women though as well, aren't they? I mean, largely.
Yeah, largely.
It's
that's
interesting,
totally, apart from the sports teachers.
Yeah.
And even there's that thing of like, I can see it in his peer group and in the parents of his peer group. There's this thing now of like, they're all for, and that the parents, or certainly the dads, or I don't know whether it's coming from the mums or the dads, but going like, we should get them into like football club or rugby club now, because they're just going to get on so much better in school if they're really good at sport.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Yeah, even if they're not actually interested in balls. Like, my son isn't interested in playing balls at all, but there's still that thing of like, you should get him into football club because he's going to get on so much better in school if he's just good at sport.
Yeah.
He literally couldn't care less.
Yeah.
I mean, could not care less about playing with a ball.
He's interesting because he's an alpha, like, and alphas we traditionally understand are going to be good at putting balls into nets.
Where are you going with that?
Well, I don't know. Ball sports have a certain, like, I don't know, a certain veneer to them, or a certain, like, there's corollaries from one ball sport to the next, that the ball goes in a hole. Again, kind of like gender stereotypes just getting reinforced. It's great that he's not into it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant. He's not buying into that thing immediately. He doesn't understand why.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't get the choice though, does he? It's us as parents that are trying to give him the message that in order to get on well in school, it's important for him to go and do those ball sports.
Yeah. So well, you understand why, because, you know, the parents want the best for their children, and they don't want to be test running deconstructing patriarchy with their children.
But it's exactly what they need to do.
Exactly.
Test run deconstructing patriarchy with your children.
Yeah,
Workbook coming soon.
But that's it's not going to be your natural inclination. You want to steer them towards something where they're going to have an easy life, and so you can understand why parents, as the big bugbear I have is non-church going parents confirming their kids and dressing their daughters up in little virgin outfits and all that stuff. That's a whole other podcast, but you understand why.
It comes from the same place.
And they, can, and I think when particularly when you're queer, you've had to think about that. You've had to think about all of that and figure all that stuff out.
Talking of children,
yeah,
read a pretty interesting article today that was talking about how patriarchy was affecting men, in as much as men who were in their, say, 40s and were childless weren't being represented in media in any way other than the man who lives in his mother's basement and has a big pot belly and is just basically a bit useless. And the men in the article were saying how women in media at that kind of age are often represented as like kooky and cool, and they've carved out their own path and they're doing their thing. They like wine, exactly, and partying and having fun. And they don't need children. But there isn't that representation for men, and that there isn't a narrative around that for men, and that actually, when you look at the statistics, men who end up not having children, who wanted children, feel the effects of childlessness worse than women, because they don't have this language around it. They don't have a way of sharing with other people. They don't have a way of expressing that loss or that grief within their friend culture, and so it comes out in anxiety, and it comes out in depression, and it comes out in drinking.
So do you think a single woman who arrives to a party of whatever, nieces or nephews or friends, kids or whatever, and there's a lot of other family things there, you think there's less of a stigma for her arriving than there is for, say, me arriving, or is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, could I answer that? I don't think there is. I think there is as much or more of a stigma. Like a man in his 40s who's childless can pass easily and nobody will ask him or feel sorry for him for not having conceived.
Yeah.
And a woman will be either, by inference or suggestion, made to, and I don't know, off a dinner party.
Yeah, that's a really bad one.
Yeah,
where just kind of
where you should actually leave.
You probably don't want to be around these children.
Yeah. But that Hollywood trope again of Bridget Jones' Diary, or all those kind of movies that where it's like, oh, you're single and childless and all that. So I think that happens more to women than just to men. But I think what
but that's the point, though, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's the point. The man he doesn't care. Everyone
the inference is that he doesn't care.
He didn't care. He didn't want the children in the first place. So no one needs to go, are you actually okay?
Exactly.
Like, how do you feel about this? Can we talk about it?
Yeah, and I would say that's another way, just like not being able to express, not being able to be vulnerable, not to be able to be afraid, not knowing how to communicate any of those normal human challenges. Men are also not allowed to care whether they have kids or not. It's just disallowed them, because that's seen as a woman's job, not a man's job. So it's one of the, I was, when I was thinking about coming here, all these costs of being part of the masculine rules, easily fitting into that. These are some of the prices of joining that group. Do you know what I mean? That I haven't had to pay.
They were saying also in the article that one of the reasons, maybe these specific men were saying that one of the reasons that men were feeling that childlessness so keenly, and that might end up in something like depression or anxiety or addiction, is because if they didn't have children, so therefore they weren't procreating, and they weren't so contributing to society financially, maybe in some kind of a way, they felt like, what am I then? What is my place in society? Because because what you're taught is valuable as a man is to be economically productive, to be domineering, the boss, the leader of the house, the payer of bills, the provider, all of that
nonsense idea, and you are to always be sure of everything, always have a solution, never show your sweating, never show your vulnerability. And men, therefore, are as afraid as any woman is. Of course, they're human. They're going to be afraid and unsure, and they've no, like I was saying earlier, no skills or tools to deal with that. And so that's why in the male Hollywood trope, you see the main thing that's focused on is that they were economically unproductive. They're 40 odd and they're living in their parents' basement. They weren't able to get their stuff together, and therefore didn't attract a mate or have children.
Yeah.
So they failed at all the male pursuits.
Stuff.
And that's a lot of pressure for somebody that you've then tied up, that they can't be afraid or unsure or have imposter syndrome or, have self-doubt. Like, I've seen it in my own family, I've seen it in neighbours and stuff where they're just really, really insecure people and really afraid of what's expected of them.
But to change that narrative, it's so threatening to our society, Western society, because at some level we need men to procreate. We need men to, supposedly, this is what we're being told, we need men to procreate, we need to be productive, we need to have more children because we're not having enough children at the moment, and we need people to get inside and be more productive because productivity is falling in the West. So that, like, what's the post that narrative? Like, I think we mentioned off camera a little bit about, like, you don't agree that, like, gender stereotype or gender quotas are a good idea in industry in terms of bringing more women into industry in order to, like, how do you start to evolve that from a modern industrial, like, complex or whatever?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I don't agree with there being gender quotas necessarily.
I put words in your mouth.
Yeah,
I don't agree.
And I haven't thought about that specific concept enough to be able to say one way or the other or think it out in different circumstances.
Sure.
But what I don't think is the mountaintop, when we've achieved everything and feminism, can hang up its tools, is that, like, there's 50% women in Fortune 500 companies and there's 50% women in cabinet, and and we still have inequality in resources, and those Fortune 500 companies are still really controlling government and really stacking the deck in their favour, and all the stuff that's happening now under male patriarchal control. If you have the same number of women in there and the same things happening, is that really what the idea of equality is? And equality cannot exist in a vacuum. You can't have equal men and equal women and then poor people. Or starving people, because that's not equality. Like, you can't have equality in some places and not in others.
It's the truth.
So equality between the genders is
part of equality.
It's a laughable concept if you don't have generalised equality. And so then it gets you to thinking, how do you achieve that? And that's much more a lofty concept from my point of view. It's to do with, like, some of the things I've thought about is, like, again, you identify the issues as they are and you highlight them. And then what is their purpose? Their purpose is to give people a framework to feel different from each other, to be distracted from their fear, to be part of a power differential where somebody has more power and somebody has less, so that you're scrambling for security. So it's a patriarchal system, leaves everybody running around chasing their tails, not really understanding that their basic human needs for connection aren't being met. And that somebody over there is wrong and is the reason why I'm not getting my needs met over here because I was told so. And so you are completely confused that actually you're afraid and you haven't learned how to have resilience and self-soothe, and you don't know that being of service is how you do that. So if you're looking at a manifesto of what you teach kids, first of all, you can't teach them an aspirational thing without highlighting it as it is. You can't heal from a disease if you haven't identified what the hell it is that's wrong with you, and then you come up with so you have to call it out, like. And then most importantly, you call out its purpose. So it's doing this, right? It's hemming you in that you're not allowed to be vulnerable, and it's hemming you in that you always have to be afraid of being attacked, and that you always have to be alluring And you have to be, well, women have to be everything, don't they? They now have to be economically productive and thin and beautiful and everything. Do you know what I mean?
So tough day at the office for you. Oh dear.
You know, at least, you know, and that's getting like that for men too, as far as you can see, you know, with like beauty standards for men and all that other nonsense that's coming along. But it's
it's interesting. I see like millennials, this grand idea of millennials. There's a lot of people who work, who I work with, but people who are in small, medium industry, enterprise, whatever, who kind of curse the millennials because they're kind of seen as like social butterflies when it comes to work. They'll kind of like try something for a day and kind of go like, oh, that's not for me. Or it's not self-actualizing whatever they want to self-actualize or whatever their ideals. And it's really interesting kind of tying that into this conversation because it kind of shows that, you know, and kind of what Instagram is saying is like, you know, being the architect of your own reality, there's a lot more being talked about, and a lot of people are going to pursue that. Now, I don't know necessarily, again, like me as a small business owner, it's interesting because I'm still attached to a very old ideal, you know, it's very threatening for, because like, who's going to work, you know? But it's interesting that people are, at least at some level, they're beginning to like unplug themselves and kind of go, well, what is it I'm doing here? What is my worth? And I'm going to go out and seek it. And a lot of people like, just like everyone just seems to have gone to Bali basically, you know, or whatever. You know?
I know.
There's a lot of people who are like doing that travel, like rather than just doing the gap year travel that you did, but doing that and then seriously pursuing something off the back of it. Like everybody's becoming a yoga teacher these days. Sorry, you've got a lot of competition. You know, do you know? It's kind of, there's a positive shift in that way. Now some of the fallout from it isn't maybe the best, but it's interesting to see. There's a thought process which has never been there. I mean, up until 5 years ago probably, where they're entering the working world and their ideas around self-worth and adding value are just different for themselves, and maybe it's in a selfish way. I don't think that's what's being talked about, but maybe actually it's for the greater good at some level, because at least it's an exploration of, you know, what it really means to be human and what, you know,
what your purpose is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Like, is your purpose, as I think I said to you before, and I've talked about this with clients, you know, is your ultimate purpose to, because it's certainly what I was taught, was that I should study hard, get a good leaving cert, get a good degree. That will secure me a good job, and then I'll always have good earning capacity, and I'll never have to worry about anything ever again. I'll be able to change my car regularly. Everybody outside will know that I'm doing all right. And that stuff runs deep. Like, I moved home to the countryside where I grew up, where car porn is a big thing. You know, what you drive is a big measure of how you're doing and all of that stuff, and I could really feel it. I didn't want to be running into my schoolmates.
Well, that's weird.
You know, and I don't care about that stuff, and yet I do.
I actually do.
You know what I mean?
You
So
can't resist.
exactly. So it does run deep, and so, you know, I don't know. Like, you get equality, right? You know, men stop raping and attacking and materially disadvantaging women in every sphere, right? You know, like underpaying them and not employing them and all the stuff that happens, right? And women are equally in power. You know, first of all, how do you achieve that? That's not something I think you can practically legislate for. So that has to come as a consciousness change. And then that does not suit the patriarchy. It can't suit it because it's based on there being power inequality, so that everybody feels like they're not enough. Men will never be man enough because their humanity will always pull them away from what they're taught as being a man.
Yeah.
And women won't be women enough. They'll never be hairless.
Yeah.
Forever, you know what I mean? Like the amount of women I have apologising for their stubbly legs when they get up on my plinth. So so you're constantly at a deficit, and that's what patriarchy wants, because you're busy being distracted from what's actually important, which is being of service and showing up and having courage and developing and all those things that are in that manifesto that you talked about in the last one, which is, you know, is the real living. Is living in uncertainty and having the resilience and the appetite to kind of grow and improve and all of that. They're human values that don't suit patriarchy. And again, I have to hold my hands up. It may well be my ignorance with regard to feminism, because I'm not well read on the topic, but I don't see, as I say, on the things that I see in articles in newspaper and the stuff that appears in my channels, let's say, anybody talking about that broader issue. We just have to make men understand that they should stop raping women.
Yeah.
You're never going to make a man stop raping women if he doesn't know how to deal with his own humanity. If he has been absolutely imprisoned by this nonsense that he has to walk in a certain way and that he has to be always sure about everything. Yeah. It's going to blow.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously being taught that women are to be derided under the current, that they're not worthy.
So the shift change at a basic level, like fundamentally the way we raise our kids, is not so much about gender neutral stuff or like what is it to be a man or what is it to be a woman. It's about what is it to be a human, and can we look at being human as being something that isn't about competition and gain as being the ultimate goals, but being of service as being the ultimate goals.
Yeah, because and I know people that are that personality type that are very ambitious and love to achieve and create, and with that create wealth. Mm-hmm. And that is not a bad thing. That is a gorgeous thing. It's a really dynamic thing, but it's not the only thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. We are taught it's the only thing.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
It's the only thing of value. And so all the caring professions, childcare, elderly care, nursing care, teaching, anything that nourishes the human spirit is barely thrown scraps economically. And bankers and, big business and all that have the lion's share of power. So what is the value system there? The value system there is that only one thing matters. And this is not about saying that doesn't matter. Of course, you need people to create things, you need people to create wealth. But if they emotionally and spiritually and in terms of their value system were taught by example, that is only for the purpose that there is enough for everybody, because we're all the one thing anyway. To bring it right to a spiritual thing, we are all one. So anything else is an illusion. And patriarchy serves a great purpose in distracting us and keeping us trapped in infighting and not enoughness. So I will never be healed because I will be forever a queer. You will never be healed because you'll forever be policed from your
policing myself
within your own behaviours, because there's certain things that just aren't allowed for you similarly, and never the twain shall meet. Right? So that's, I think, what I just be dying for people to be talking about.
Cool, thank you very much. That's I feel like that's a nice kernel, a nice thing to end up on. It's not like it's not the workbook, but it's the start of the work, isn't it?
We haven't fixed patriarchy.
No, damn it!
You failed again.
In fairness, I think I have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in your world, I think you have. Yeah, amazing. Good for you, Deadly. Lovely to talk to you and lovely to meet you, man.
And you.
Deadly, we'll see you again. Hopefully, we may get you. Hopefully, again when we have our bigger round table where we bring all of the...
Oh, I'd love to,
Yeah, would you come?
Be a fun one.
Oh my god, I'd love to, yeah.
Bro. Okay, that'll be fun sometime in January, hopefully, when we get to put that together.
Yeah.
As we said, diaries are tough. We're going to manage 8 diaries for that one or something like that. Ugh. I don't know how many microphones. Anyway, thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some insight into what maybe you can begin to kind of like do in your own lives as regards to opening up the conversation around patriarchy and beginning to kind of like self-examine and reflect and start to talk to your friends and families as well. Hopefully it's all grist to the mill. So in the meantime, please like and subscribe, post your comments, and we'll try and get any info you have to Kevin, or any questions you have to Kevin.
And if you want to support us, you can go to our Patreon page.
Oh, yes, you can. Yeah, absolutely. You can see our little silly video and give us some money so we can build our little dreams. Thanks. Bye.
So welcome back, Finn and Lydia here.
Hello.
From Wandering into Wellness. I thought it would be interesting, since we were talking about protein powder and how that supports our muscles and helps us in our exercise, and that I would challenge Finn to a wall squat.
Okay. Wall squat off. So let's hope the wall squat off works, because have we got our news test today?
We have.
We had a news test. So it's like
news test in this morning.
Modern day ready rec. It is fuel for the muscles, and you guys can go to newsdesk.co.uk and you can use the code wellness15, which is our coupon code, our very special little coupon code. So you get 15% discount on all Newsdesk products, which we are big fans of. We don't really support any other kind of companies in this sort of way. We're not supported by any other companies in this way, but we're really, really keen on NewsZest. And
we're just like nerdy big fans, really, aren't we?
We're big nerdy big fans. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
We want to spread the NewsZest word. So we are going to do a wool squat off and see who lasts the longest. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I've already taught 2 classes today and just done a big, massive exercise
this morning. I know it was
did a workout like 7 million hours ago. But
and
anyway,
cycled twice
today. It's a
today.
fair contest. It's a fair contest. Let's go.
So if I fail, I'm like doubly failing. This hurts. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to set the clock
backs
here.
Against the wall. Well, I mean, everyone will just see who fails. Really,
Excuse my language.
Backs against the wall. Slide down. So your bum needs to be parallel to your knees.
There we go.
There we go. So Finn, whilst we're in this wool squat, I think I would challenge you to finding some interesting things to say about the letters of NewsZest. So tell us some facts about NewsZest, beginning with N. N is for?
N is for not the protein you'd imagined. Whey protein is the obvious one, but this one is a European golden pea.
U.
U is for ugly, not us. We are all we're based on the beauty of vegan protein, and ugly is animal agriculture that's intensive rearing, and this is not an ugly product.
This
is a
really
product that is like
right?
clean inside and
out. Z.
Z's an evil one, eh? Z is for all the zeal you can muster out of a day. NewsZest has got like a squillion health ambassadors, top tennis players, top rugby players. Oh, Finn's slipping. They've got like all the New Zealand rugby team on it, like Mananu and all these sorts of amazing guys, and that is because it makes you perform. It's not because they're paid by it. They literally don't get paid anything by NewsZest.
No, that's super cool, isn't it? E.
E is for goddamn ethics. Ethics in a company. So when NewsZest approached Dr. Robert Verkerk of the Alliance for Natural Health 3 years ago to produce a multivitamin, he said no, because you'll make me compromise on my ethics, you'll make me compromise on my standards. And so they said, okay, well, what if we don't make you compromise? He said, like, okay, well, give it a shot. And so we can give it one shot, and they have a product called Good Green Stuff, which is what Robert Verkerk says is the ultimate in terms of nutritional everyday needs for 99% of all the audience. Go on.
Is it E? S.
S is for sweating. If you're a fan of sweating, then NewsZest helps your muscles recover big time. So you've got leucine, arginine, valine, isoleucine, all the ones that are really key amino acids for growth hormone.
T.
T is for teetering on the brink of failure.
But yet, luckily, we took our NewsZest, and so we're just
going to make it through. Yay!
Yay, we did it.
We haven't failed yet.
No. How much longer do you reckon you've got? I'm reaching, we're shaking.
I'm reaching, shaking as well. I'm like, where is it hurting most?
Quads.
Yeah, but where in the quads? The front of them? The middle of them? Yeah, ditto. Oh, burning more than shaking though.
So bad. So we probably finished.
Okay, one of us has to fail.
Remember our code, holy moly. Remember our code, Wellness15.
Wellness15, use that code UK.
Go.
Best of luck. I win. Yay!